One of the President Trump's biggest priorities on the campaign trail, but without a fully staffed export-import bank, which dates back several years, a key piece of the trade picture may be missing. Joining us now, Senator Heidi Heitkamp, a Democrat of North Dakota, who is behind legislation to reauthorize the export-import bank. This is like so many things, an issue with people that are very sure of themselves on both sides of the issue. You think we need this, though, to compete?
Well, absolutely.
Because other companies and countries around the world get.
But Joe, you know we reauthorized it.
Right.
With super majorities in both the House and the Senate. And because of one guy, we don't have a quorum on the bank. So we can do any deal under 10 million. We just can't do a deal over 10 million. What people don't understand is they always say the Bank of Boeing, GE, Caterpillar, whoever it is. Those guys are assemblers. And so there's tons of people in the supply chain in little towns in North Dakota, all across the Midwest. The state with the highest amount of suppliers into Boeing is Texas. This is critically important for jobs. It's critically important for exports. If you could wipe out all export finance agencies, we'd do fine, but we need to be competitive.
It seems like something that maybe the Freedom Caucus might be against, but something that Trump probably would be for.
Well, you know, when I visited with Trump in December, with then President-elect Trump, I raised it because he had just done the carrier deal. I said, hey, you want to take credit for 170,000 jobs? I know how you can do that. You can reauthorize the XM.
What was his response?
He said, I'm for it. I used to be against it. I'm for it. And we'll try and get the nominees lined up.
That was a John Kerry invitation.
No.
He was for it before he was against it.
No. He explained that after he found out that there were jobs leaving, that he was concerned about those workers. And every time I've seen the president since then, I've raised the XM Bank. We know they're moving on some nominees. We're hoping in May we'll get this done.
Let's quickly talk. We can return to this if we want. But I want to get, I don't know if you're on the record talking about Justice Gorsuch right now. And cynical people say you're in a red state, that Trump won, you're going to be up for re-election. That was what was behind your vote for Gorsuch. Or was it something else? Was it that you thought he was a judge that should have been confirmed by the entire Senate?
I think the great frustration that people have in America is elections have consequences. And when all you do is obstruct, all you do is say no, no, no. I mean, I judged him not based on what happened to Merrick Garland, which, quite honestly, was atrocious. It was appalling. I didn't judge Gorsuch by that. I judged him by my interview and my review of his record. And would he be the judge I'd pick? No, never. But he is the judge that the duly elected president picked. And I think that we have enough politics in the executive branch. We have enough politics in the Congress. Let's try and figure it out. Yeah, I have.
And?
Well, there's a lot of people disappointed, and there's a lot of people who walk by in the coffee shop and say, thanks for your vote. They're tired of partisanship. And one of the things that we demonstrated, one of the big major decisions, is we ended up doing something that I think we will regret now for the rest of the Congress, and that is making sure that no judge will ever require 60 votes. You know what happens then? You end up with people who represent either end of the political spectrum. Justice.
Because we already were, we know, we were already at no judge.
You're so precise, always, Joe, in your language.
No, it's just it happened in 2013 with your party. It started, so right?
Oh, you know.
Well, what's all judges before, but the only thing left was Supreme Court justices.
Well, and that's a pretty important job.
That was a slippery slope. That was a slope that we went
But strategically, you think that the Democrats in that instance made a mistake then?
Yeah, I do. But you know, I'm not in charge, and that's above my pay grade.
How easy or hard, though, is it to communicate and articulate that to the American public?
Well, I think
the sort of strategy, if you will, that goes into how people vote relative to these issues.
I don't know that you need to articulate a strategy. I think what you need to articulate is that we're trying to work together. Elections have consequences. This was somebody who was qualified. You may not agree with every one of his decisions, but, you know, for instance, something that didn't get talked about, he was endorsed by the National Congress of American Indians because of opinions he had written on sovereignty, which is pretty important to me.
I wanted to ask you, Senator, about something else. I invest in mostly U.S. companies, and I'm very concerned about the health of the workforce. And I understand you have some interesting ideas about the opioid problem.
Well, I'd love to take credit for Joe's idea. It's Joe Manchin's idea, but I'm a full-on, full-throated supporter. And it is, if you look at the trajectory of opioid abuse in this country, you will see a direct relationship to prescription numbers and to the abuse. What we're saying is 1 penny for 1 milligram of opioid prescription would lead us to over $1 billion a year. That's how much actually being prescribed. We would put that money in a fund. But the one thing that we have to do is we have to look at the new science around addiction. And we have to think about, you know, it used to be the 12 steps, done, you're done. Now we know that medically assisted treatment can be very effective. It's emerging as kind of a new strategy. We need to look at different strategies for addiction. We're doing a lot of work on trauma in my office, making sure that we treat trauma very early on. Children who have experienced trauma, 4 or more instances of adverse childhood experiences, much higher rates of addiction.
What are you
and
seeing
so
at these
we're working
companies?
on trauma.
I just think it's an important thing. It's important to the pension plans that I represent. And I think this is, you know, I'm glad you're taking leadership on this.
You know, public health challenges, whether it is obesity, whether it is the opioid thing, those are major challenges to the workforce of the future. Once we figure out what that workforce needs to know, you know, another thing we're working on is a kind of 21st century, what do jobs look like in 20 years? Right. And I think this automation analysis it has to be paid attention to right now, especially by educators.
Right. Senator, tax policy. We talked about the roller coaster the market went on yesterday, in part because of comments from Sean Spicer that potentially we may not get a new tax policy before August, the way the Treasury Secretary had suggested earlier. Math it out for us. Do you think there's a chance that we see a tax policy that's voted on and approved by then?
I think it's interesting because we just met with Gary Cohen and we said what's on the table, and I liken it like a funnel. So is it here? Is the recommendation here, or is it up here in the stratosphere? And when you look at it, everything's on the table. And so it's a long way from getting to everything's on the table to the proposal that will find its way into the discussion in the Congress. So I think we're a ways off.
You're not optimistic that there's going to be a tax plan?
No, I mean, I think that the first debate we're going to have, the fundamental debate is, are we going to pay for it? Because if we're going to pay for it with a border adjustment tax, the answer is no, we aren't going to get it done. If we're looking at, you know, everybody says it's going to be revenue neutral. Well, I'm an old tax collector. That's what I did in North Dakota. I used to laugh when people said that. I said it might be in the number that you get from CBO, but per taxpayer, it's never revenue neutral. And all those people who are going to lose, if you get rid of interest deductibility, if you look at exchanging that for expensing, all those people are going to lose are going to be the people knocking on the door in Washington, D.C. saying, don't do this.
Yeah, that's the view on the Democratic side, but where do you see the fault lines within the Republican Party on this issue?
Well, I think on the border adjustment tax, there's huge fault lines. People who represent major retailers, take a look at Tom Cotton, who has Walmart in his state. He's not going to agree to the border adjustment tax.
Do you think that
I shouldn't speak for him, but I would assume.
What happened with Gorsuch, do you think that did certain Democrats get it out of their system, and now they're ready to talk about something?
Why do you blame Democrats?
Well, okay, because
Democrats
at this point, you got nobody for that. Okay, but at this point, will it be, no, we're never going to do anything, or we made our statement about Merrick Garland, now we're ready to work on tax reform?
I don't know. I think tax reform's a little tougher. If you said, could you do tax reform with a major infrastructure piece? I think the answer is yes. And then we're talking about inversions, and we're talking about, you know, repatriation, deemed repatriation,
infrastructure,
phony money maybe.
You gave a great vote for private sector infrastructure, and we've given you kudos for that before with Keystone. So.
Well, I've long believed in Keystone. We've got to have an energy infrastructure in this country that moves energy where it needs to be. And a lot of our pipelines are aging. A lot of the distribution system you have here in New York's aging. So why aren't we replacing that? We're replacing that because there is a leave it in the ground mentality that is dangerous to the infrastructure, energy.
I just guess my question was for infrastructure or tax reform. Are there only 3 Democratic senators that you can count on only because they're in red states, or will there be more bipartisan, at least conversations about tax reform? Because that's something supposedly even Obama wanted to do.
I think if you go back and take a look, Ben Cardin has a really interesting proposal. Ron Wyden's been working on this. All of the attention's really been in the House and with Speaker Ryan, who wants to do this with a 51-vote majority. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're back to the proposals that you see being discussed and analyzed in the Senate Finance Committee.
I don't see how the Freedom Caucus goes for, like 28. I don't think they'll go for 28, Andrew. I think
28%.
28%.
Yeah, I think they're going to want 25 or 20. And
There's no pay for.
That's the problem in Washington.
Right. What's that?
Perfect is always the enemy of good. I want it my way or
We're
no
seeing
way.
that,
And
yeah.
that's what we get is no way because people are too busy thinking about my way.
Real quickly on the level of the dollar, are you still concerned about it? Even, let's say there's no border. Obviously, the border adjustment tax could go way up, but regardless,
Well, number one, I think this assumption that we're all going to blindly believe that the dollar is going to adjust and my diapers will still be cheap is craziness. But for me, I'm very concerned about dollar values because it affects commodities, and that's what we do in North Dakota. And we're very concerned about what's happening with agricultural trade.
Hey,
Right.
final question from me. They want us to end just so we get to a commercial. But the airstrike last week, which was praised in large part by many Democrats, did that change at all the dynamic with which both parties are interacting with each other?
I don't know. What you see is this kind of, because everything's been so centered on the White House, what you don't see is the day-to-day sit down, let's work it through in the Congress. And I think both the Armed Services and the Foreign Relations Committee, led by people who really want to see consensus in foreign policy, Bob Corker and John McCain, hopefully that narrative will shape up and we'll actually see a Syria policy.
So, no announcement from you about the Lieberman move or an Angus King type independent baby steps. You're staying with this party.
I'm just telling you.
You're staying with this party.
Why do you assume you know every Democrat in the country?
I was
There
just
still
asking.
are Democrats in the middle of the country.
I just was asking whether there was anything you needed, but Senator, thank you.
Really? Thank you.
The one and only Senator Heidi Heitkamp. Coming up when we return, stocks to watch ahead of the opening bell. Take a look at the futures right now. The clock returns in just a moment with the Dow looking like it would open off 5 points. Back in a moment.